All right. My name is Craig Volland. I'm a member of the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Forum Committee. Welcome to the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church Forum. The forum's mission is to afford a platform for the discussion of significant issues, especially those which involve ethical values in the contemporary world, and to promote critical thinking. And of course, we're doing this on Zoom. We may, at some point here, not too long from now, go back to on-site at the church, but it has actually worked out pretty well in the last almost 2 years now. So this morning, we're very fortunate to have two very interesting speakers and a very interesting topic. It's making the case for green burials. We have Steve Nicely, who is a board member of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Greater Kansas City and a retired Kansas City Star journalist. And we have Sarah Cruz, who's founder of Heartland Prairie Cemetery in central Kansas near Salina, 14 miles northeast of Salina. I was just informed. That's the first Prairie Resurrection Natural Cemetery in Kansas. And it's on land donated by the Land Institute, which many of you probably have heard of. So, okay, we're gonna start with Steve, and then we'll follow with Sarah. And we also have a nice PowerPoint that they prepared. So take it away, Steve.
Okay, thank you. It's good to be here on this bright sunny day. Here we are, Funeral Consumers Alliance, Greater Kansas City. We'll talk about green and natural burial, and I'll give you some background on the Funeral Consumers Alliance first, and then a little background on me before that. So I actually have some experience working in a funeral home. During my senior year in high school and my freshman year in community college in Wyandotte County, I worked for George F. Porter and Sons Funeral Home there. And I did maintenance. I was a doorman during funerals. I was a chauffeur. I was strong and I could help move heavy bodies. I witnessed embalmings and even autopsy. My main attraction to the funeral home to begin with was Cadillac. Porter's had a beautiful 1955 brand new Cadillac limousine, 7 passengers. And Cadillacs in that era were iconic vehicles. We didn't have all these multiple makes and models that we have today, and they were distinctive looking. So I got my hands on that Cadillac when I went to work for Porter's. And at that time, I guess I didn't have much direction in life. Probably my main ambition was to someday drive a Cadillac and smoke cigars. It was a wonderful job, great people to work for, routine stuff. Old people died, and that was natural, that old people were supposed to, and I really didn't relate to them too much. But then something happened that changed my life pretty much entirely. I walked into the preparation room one day to pick up some supplies, cleaning supplies or something. And there on the white marble table was the body of a beautiful young woman. And she was her hair was done, her makeup was done. She looked like she just laid down there for a minute for a nap before she's going on a date or something. And when I saw that young woman there, it stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, oh my God, I would have been interested in her. And it turns out, you know, I was interested in her. Actually, I guess I'm still interested in her. I wrote a story about that experience for an English class at Donnelly Community College. And my instructor, Sister Mary Faith Schuster, Benedictine, read the story to the class. I was surprised at that. And then afterwards, she took me aside and she said, I think you could be a writer. And I thought, geez, maybe I could be. And basically, I just went on and got a journalism degree and then eventually worked at the Kansas City Star for 36 years. And then I retired. And one day, maybe, who knows, I'd like to be able to meet the spirit of that young woman and thank her for the tremendous impact that she had on my life over my long 84 years by her young death. So here we are, the Funeral Consumers Alliance, some background. Our mission is basically an educational mission. We provide information to families about the funeral industry, its practices, how much they charge, and what's lawful and what's not lawful. And it's just all, whatever values and lifestyles they have, that's what we try to support. We're Funeral Consumers Alliance of Greater Kansas City is nonprofit, all volunteer, financed entirely by donations and grants. Our sole product is information that we provide on our website and on our mail list with newsletters, and we do that free of charge. There are about 50 local chapters of the Funeral Consumers Alliance, with the headquarters organized in South Bennington, Vermont. Our main services here are price surveys and newsletters available free on our website. The funeral rule, Federal Trade Commission funeral rule, requires funeral homes to keep standardized price lists of all their services. And it also requires them to turn over those price lists to anybody who asks for one in person. And there are actually 113 funeral homes, funeral providers in our area, including Lawrence and Leavenworth and some other outlying cities. And we, every 2 years, update that price list. And most of the funeral homes cooperate with us. We have good relationships with most of them, but a few of them don't cooperate with us. And they think it's none of our business how much they charge and why are we butting into their business. And that's when we just send our volunteers out, we knock on their doors and we ask for their price list, standardized price list in person, and they have to give it to us. So we have the prices. This is probably The most valuable thing that we do, besides offering other advice to people. So this is one of the pages of the price. It's a 4-page price list, and this is from one section of town. And the funeral homes are named. There are prices for 3 basic types of funerals: phone number and address, just basic good information. These listings make it easy to compare prices because there's a big difference between them. Here you can see the difference. The survey contains the prices of the 3 standard types of funerals. And the standard funeral is, it includes embalming, it includes visitation, and it includes a service. It does not include, none of these prices here include a casket. That's going to be added extra, depends on how much you want to spend for one. And it does not include cemetery prices. So you need to be able to know the average price for a standard funeral here is close to $6,000 in our last survey. You put in the casket, a moderate price casket, and the cemetery costs, and it's easy $10,000 or more. Well, but 6,000, and then you can see the price range on the right is the lowest price is almost half of that, and the highest price is much higher. And then immediate burial, it just means no service, no embalming, no visitation. It's an immediate burial of the body. That knocks off close to $3,000 from the price. And the range is, the lowest is less than 1,000 and the highest is 5 times more. The direct cremation then is what more and more people are having done these days. The average is $1,700, and the range is tremendous. I mean, from $675 to $3,500. So it's just good, valuable information that can save people a lot of money, especially if they don't have a lot of money to begin with. The beginnings of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Greater Kansas City is here at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in 1961. Several members of the church founded the Kansas City Memorial Society. And that was in reaction to misrepresentation, what was perceived as misrepresentation by funeral homes and charging too much or not explaining it enough or not giving people options. And so several members of the church, including Reverend Bragg, founded the Kansas City Memorial Society. Numerous other places in the United States did the same thing because of the same concerns of people. And eventually those memorial societies merged into a national organization, which is the National Funeral Consumers Alliance. And there are about 50 local affiliates of the National Funeral Consumers Alliance. Green burial, it means no embalming, no steel caskets, no vaults, or also called concrete grave liners, And burial is only 3 or 4 feet deep, because that's where most of the microbes are. Microbes enhance the decomposition and the return of the body to the earth. Burial also has to be in a biodegradable container, the wood, shroud, cardboard, wicker maybe, and just put it in the grave, and the filled dirt is put on top of the body right directly. For 10 years, we could not find a single cemetery. There's about 80 cemeteries in the metro area, and not a single one that would allow natural burial. And then we found one, the 1-acre Highland Cemetery of Prairie Village on West 65th Street. It was founded in the 1860s when all burials were green. Its aging sexton was ready to turn over the responsibility to others. And so 3 of our Funeral Consumers Alliance board members and 2 other members of the community formed a nonprofit corporation and assumed its management in 2015. It had 150 grave sites available for sale at that point. And by 2020, it was sold out. And most of the people who bought those graves were seeking eventual natural burial. This is a newsletter story about it, and it's also available on the website. So why was there so much resistance? If you're in the cemetery business, there's some good reasons for it. As one cemetery manager told me, there ain't no money in it. There are no profits from embalming, steel caskets, or vaults. Plus, there's increased maintenance costs. Vaults allow the packing of the dirt on top of the vault, and so you can have a level surface on top, put sod on it, then mow it the next day. With a natural burial, there's no packing. You want that oxygen to stay in the dirt. And the mound is left on top to settle over time with weather. And then later it can be leveled. So there's more maintenance involved. Less profit, more maintenance. This is his first green burial at Highland Cemetery in probably a century. Donis Moore Perlman of Shawnee wanted a natural burial, and her son, Kevin, saw that she got it in 2017. Her body was buried in a cardboard casket. And he ordered it from a website for $200. The funeral home charged $1,000 for the direct burial and refrigerating the body for a few days. And the grave and the digging cost $1,200. The total was $2,400 for the whole thing. This is my childhood friend, Nick Dalano. He was buried in a large size shroud because he was a big man. It had a board at the bottom for stability. It had 3 handles on each side so that it could be carried. And when the body was placed in the grave, then members of the family and other friends helped fill the grave, including his grandson. Here's Nick's graves after we leveled it and put grass seed on it. it wasn't that much trouble, really. Terry Woodbury, who's with us today, wanted a gravesite at Highland Cemetery, but it was sold out. And so he bought one from somebody who had an extra, paid about $2,500 for it. And when I took him up there to show him where it was, he had to lay down on the ground and test it out. There's another natural burial in a cardboard casket. And that's Lyle Van Vleet. He was one of the board members for the cemetery and also for the Funeral Consumers Alliance. So we really miss Lyle. Here's something that more cemeteries are starting to offer, and that's a modified natural burial. They have policies against natural burial for all those reasons. They can offer a modified natural burial. And that's where the container is put in the bottom of the grave on the ground, and then they take the vault, take the lid off of it, turn it upside down, and then lower it over the container. And then they can pack the dirt on top, pack it down. It reduces the maintenance costs. This is modified natural burial of Ron McGill, Bev McGill's husband. Here they are, Ron and Bev McGill. They had 11 children and lots of grandchildren. But Bev, the one who recruited me to be on the board, also was an activist. She promoted La Leche League breastfeeding during a period when that not very many children were breastfed. And then she joined Kansas Advocates for Better Care for the Elderly. And then she joined the Funeral Consumers Alliance. And it caused her daughter, Tina, to ask her when she joined the Funeral Consumers Alliance. She says, "Gee, Mom, first babies, then old people, now dead people. What's next?" Other cemeteries now offer natural burial. And there are two of them here in town that do. The Elmwood Cemetery at 4900 East Truman Road started offering it about 2 years ago. And then just now, you're the first to hear about it. The Longview Cemetery in South Kansas City has a new green burial section. So they're the only two now that are open to the public that allow it. Jewish and Muslim cemeteries do, but are not open to the public. So also Oak Hill Cemetery in Lawrence, Mount Muncie Cemetery in Lansing, Sarah's Heartland Prairie near Salina, and Sugar Creek and Green Acres cemeteries near Columbia, Missouri do. This is newsletter story on the left about the Elmwood Cemetery. When it started in 1872, most of all the graves were natural burial, and then they went to a policy of requiring vaults to keep the maintenance costs down. And just 2 years ago, they removed the requirement for the vaults so that natural burial can be held there again. It's the resting place for many of Kansas City's early leaders and builders. Oak Hill Cemetery in Lawrence is a city-owned cemetery. And City Commissioner Dennis Heiberger pushed for that and got it accomplished in 2008. So it was the first one in our area to make that allowance for natural burial. Other cemeteries have not experienced as much demand for natural burial, but Oak Hill is different. Oak Hill and Highland, I guess. It has sold 181 of its 251 natural burial plots. And it's had so far 33 natural burials. And this is what Heiberger said. A lot of us would like to minimize our impact on the planet on our way out. This is why natural burial is coming about, because people are concerned about the environment. 45 million board feet of hardwood, 104,000 tons of steel in caskets and vaults, 1.6 million tons of reinforced concrete, 827,000 gallons of embalming fluid, and the total amount of energy created in the transport and the manufacture of all that is quite a bit of air pollution. Okay, let me just turn it over to Sarah now. Okay, Sarah.
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, I'm Sarah Cruz, and I'm the founding director of Heartland Prairie Cemetery. As we mentioned earlier, it's located about 14 miles northeast of Salina. So if you're coming from Kansas City and want to come take a look at the cemetery and walk around on our trails, you get off on the Niles Road exit and head north, and you'll come to it. So Heartland Prairie Cemetery was formed in, well, we applied for a nonprofit status in 2015, and that took a little while to go through. So we are registered as a nonprofit cemetery. It's a 501c13 is the federal designation for that. And to start a new cemetery in any state requires that you raise a certain amount of money for the permanent maintenance fund. And here in Salina, or here in Kansas, I should say, it's a pretty low figure. It was $10,000 that we needed to raise, and we held a crowdsourced funding campaign online. Got a lot of local donations, but also donations from people around the country that are very much interested in supporting this kind of burial. So Heartland Prairie Cemetery is a all natural burial ground. In other words, we are the modern green burial movement is interested not only in providing green burials, like in some of these hybrid cemeteries that Steve was just telling us about, where they do conventional burial in part of the cemetery, and then they've opened up for green burial. This cemetery is all natural practices in the way that we land management. We are restoring the land to native prairie species. We've replanted 8.5 acres of the burial meadow into native prairie species and maintain walking trails throughout the site, and it's 13 acres. So by being devoted entirely to eco-friendly practices, we manage this like we would a prairie, where we mow, we do periodic burning of the grasses there, and we don't use pesticides and herbicides, which is common in conventional cemeteries. As I said, we maintain trails throughout the cemetery, and we were very much interested in keeping this a community, getting the community involved in this. So we have had a relationship with a Boy Scout troop here in town, and 2 scouts have earned their Eagle Scout through doing projects at the cemetery. So one of them helped us finish the trails, and the other has built 2 benches and installed those so that people can just sit and in quiet contemplation or bird watch here at the cemetery. So the other thing about the green burial movement is that we're really reimagining what the cemetery space looks and feels like by creating habitat, open green spaces, and in our case, a swath of tall grass prairie as a final resting place. Steve gave you a great overview of how green burial works. So yeah, we receive unembalmed bodies in biodegradable containers or wrapped in a shroud. Also, family and friends can opt to dig the grave themselves. We contract with a gravedigger who uses a backhoe, but if people would rather dig the grave themselves, they can do that. We provide the tools and the support and the instruction, and so that can be done. And often, I think you saw in all these pictures how people are very much involved. Another sort of ethos around green burial is rather than having people do it for you, we invite the family to participate in the lowering of the body, the digging of the grave if they would like, and also filling in the grave at the end. And at Heartland, we also provide native prairie seed mix that they can sprinkle on top of the covered grave. So we picked a seed mix that has a lot of flowering native plants in it as well. So depending on the time of year that you come out, you'll see a lot of flowers that are also blooming out there. And it's really beautiful. And this whole prairie restoration process takes a long time. We're looking at probably 10 years or so before it's fully established in a way that is, it would still be a little longer after that before it's fully established. But right now, if you come out and visit, you'll see a lot of the tall native grasses. Of course, there's nothing flowering right now. But yeah, this is what it looked like last spring. So we've mentioned shrouds. There's certainly shrouds that can be professionally made and ordered and delivered in the mail, or it could be something as simple as a quilt, the one here on the left. This woman was buried. She requested that she was wrapped and buried in a quilt that her mother made. So she was in her 80s when she passed. So her mother made this many years ago. She is on what we call a burial board in green burial. So her shrouded body, because it was simply wrapped, in a piece of fabric, is placed on this board that a local craftsperson made out of repurposed wood. And the ropes are attached to that. And then when we lower the body into the grave, it's done with those ropes. And again, the family and community does that themselves. And then there on the right is my family burying my father's shrouded body, also on a burial board. And he died in March of 2020. And we handmade a shroud out of colorful fabrics that we had. So that's my family, his granddaughters, and my sisters and their husbands, and we buried him out at Heartland. So another thing that I want to tell you about that many of you may not be aware of is that it's entirely possible and legal, both in Kansas and in Missouri, to do all of the after-death care yourself. If the family is educated and understands the process, the legal requirement is that a death certificate must be filed. Here in Kansas, it's through the Vital Statistics Office in Kansas, in Topeka, at the Capitol. But they will receive information over the phone from the family and then send it to the attending physician to sign. So that can be done on your own. You just have to understand how to get it done, because it needs to happen within 3 days of the death. But when Steve was talking about the prices, as they said, they don't include cemetery fees, as he said, but if you do the vigil and the visitation at home, what's called a home funeral, you don't have to pay a funeral director at all. And so in both of these cases, the only fees for the family was the fees at the cemetery. So we charged $1,200 for the plot. $400 is what our gravedigger charges with the backhoe. If you dig it yourself, you don't pay the $400, obviously. So a family could have a burial at Heartland if they took care of the body on their own and simply paid for the plot, and made their own shroud or made their own coffin. It's simply $1,200 for the whole thing. So this is what a home funeral might look like. This man was just recently, earlier this month, buried at Heartland. And I supported the family. They had reached out to me because he wanted to be buried there. And I told them about home-based after-death care. And while they had never heard of it, and the whole idea seemed to, it's pretty culturally unfamiliar at this point because we haven't been doing this practice that we did for years and years prior to the advent of the, modern funeral industry. I just gave them a lot of information over the phone and the website to the National Home Funeral Alliance, and they wrapped him in a shroud, kept his body at home for 5 days, cooled with ice packs, wrapped him up in a sheet, and then his son hand-built this burial box for him. They needed to wait for family to arrive from all over the country, and it was beautiful, perfectly safe and legal. People came and honored him, had a visitation here in this room, food and drink, and then drove him out to the cemetery themselves in the handmade coffin. There he is. We always, with shrouded bodies, and it's not nearly as necessary with a body in a box like this, but I love the aesthetic of adding leaves, and especially over a shrouded body. We will put a couple of bags of leaves over the shrouded body. So the idea of throwing then shovelfuls of dirt on top of the body isn't quite as jarring, perhaps. But that's what we did here. We put a bed of leaves, and then this was lowered down into the grave, and then we put some leaves on top before filling in the grave. And then we had our gravedigger scoop out some of these tall, already established grasses, and we put them back on top of the grave. Now, if you look real closely to the picture on the left, you'll see a little metal marker. And that's how we mark the graves. The top of each grave has an engraved metal marker that has the name and the birth and death dates of the person buried there. And it's set in the center of the grave on a 12-inch piece of rebar. And that's how the graves are marked. So that stays flush with the ground. As the grave settles, so goes the marker, and it will always be there. And on the right-hand side is what my father's grave looked like last spring, which is pretty cool. And you have to look super closely to see his marker, but it is hidden there amongst the grasses on the middle right-hand side. That's it. There's the website for the National Home Funeral Alliance, which is the resource for how to do a home funeral, how to take care of your own at home. And I'm also the host of a podcast where people tell their stories, because I figured, the more that we hear these stories, the more likely people are going to go, oh, maybe that's something I could do. In fact, the family that I helped in Missouri, they're in the Kansas City area, who I just showed you pictures of that burial. I recommended that she listen to a few of these episodes, and that's what convinced her that she could do this herself. So there it is, A Path Home, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And there's one more slide, I think, of Steve's that will wrap it up. There, more resources, how to get in touch with Steve.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming today.
I guess we're open for question and answers, right?
Right. And I want to mention what's next week, and then we can do Q&A. We're going to have Aaron Deacon. He's managing director of KC Digital Drive. He's going to talk about the digital future of Kansas City.
Carol has a question in the chat. You
Oh.
see that? Do you have positions on natural, modified, or cremation? Natural burial is the most simple and direct return to the earth. You might have noticed in the modified natural burial slide that body and that coffin needed to go a lot deeper into the earth. Steve mentioned earlier that 3 to 4 feet, 3.5 feet is really the sort of sweet spot for the decomposers in the ground. In order to accommodate an upside down vault, you have to go a whole lot deeper. And then you also have concrete on, 4 sides. The bottom is open, but again, the bottom of that box was probably almost 6 feet deep. And cremation, we had to sort of go through that slide in a hurry, but the way that cremation is done in this country is a very industrial procedure, burning fossil fuels at high temperatures for several hours and releasing a lot of CO2 and other things into the atmosphere. There's no regulations around modifying that.
Okay, Carol Fields.
My question was also meant for Steve Nicely.
Okay.
And, that I guess I'd like to hear more about if anybody else wants to about the other processing instead of the traditional.
Well, I'll just ask a quick question. It's Craig. On that slide that we had to go through real quick about cremation, it was equivalent to 750 miles, driving 750 miles. Was that right?
Yeah, at 25 miles to the gallon. Takes about 30 gallons of fuel, the equivalent of 30 gallons of fuel to cremate a body. And so that turns into 750 miles. And if you've got a car that gets 25 miles to the gallon, cremation providers like to claim that it is really, relatively speaking, fairly environmental. And that's because when you consider everything that goes into a burial,
right, all the resources that we're burying, cremation is
all
a better
the resources
alternative.
we're burying, and relatively speaking, a cremation doesn't use that many resources. For instance, to manufacture the vault and manufacture the casket and transport them and so forth.
Renee, would you put that Aquamation back up there like you had? Because I think we had to skip that one, and that's another
I am
method.
trying to get back to that, yes.
Because I think just to be complete, we should talk about or have Steve. It was in Steve's slides, I believe.
That's right.
But the pictures are lovely you have.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
I'm struggling with the slideshow right now, but I'll have it up in a sec.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Steve. Tell us
talking
about
aquamation, which is water cremation. And it's a process that's said to be greener than fire, and I no doubt it is. It's alkaline hydrolysis, and that's a mixture of some 250 gallons of water with 5% alkaline chemicals, and it's in a tank, a stainless steel tank, and they apply heat to it. They circulate the water, the chemicals in the water. Sometimes they use pressure to basically dissolve the body. the body's flesh. And then after that's done, you have bones that are left over. You drain the fluid into the sanitary sewer system. And then the bones are dried and pulverized, and you can return those to the family. There's something of the person body left for the family. The water that's left over is nutrient rich, and it's some people don't like the idea. It contains the remains of the loved one, of flushing it down into the sanitary sewer. That's the same thing they do when you embalm a body. You pump in embalming fluid, and the blood comes out, and the blood goes into the sanitary sewer. So I suppose it's not that much difference. And it all goes to water treatment plants where it's processed. It'd be nice, seems like to me, if you could reclaim some of that water and then use it for your garden or trees, or to nourish them, and you can think of your loved one, something of your loved one in the green new life. And but 250 gallons is a lot of water, and there's a lot of too much logistics involved, and you could work it out. It could be done. Be nice if it could be.
Are the prices and list of availabilities in the metro area of this on your chart?
Our price surveys are available on our website. And
that include people that do the alkaline hydrolysis, right?
No, it doesn't. There are no people in the Kansas City. There's no equipment in the Kansas City area for alkaline hydrolysis. You can if you have a pet, there's a place in Kansas City where you can have that done for your pet. But it's just a matter of time. Somebody is going to offer it here over some time.
Okay, I have a question for Sarah. What, a lot of these cemeteries have been around for 100, 200 years. What is the nature of of your cemetery out there, the natural one? Is there some means by which we know it's always going to be there?
Yeah, just the fact that it's registered with the state. Once it's registered with the state as a cemetery, that it's a cemetery in perpetuity. It can never be developed, or nothing can go on there. That's why they have you put in place that permanent maintenance fund. And then also we went through the zoning department in Ottawa County, and they also confirmed that it's a cemetery through this special use permit for the land. It's a cemetery in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm. I've many times drive by in Turner, which is in Wyandotte County. There's a little bitty cemetery in the town there that I've driven by probably 1,000 times. There's never anybody doing anything in it. So the reason it's still there and looks good is because somebody, there's a foundation that somebody runs to pay for it. Is that how that works? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I think that probably there's a permanent maintenance fund, and it might be just a local group that has access to this old cemetery now, and they're tending to it using those resources that have been set aside. So the way that works is with every burial that happens, we need to donate a percentage of that, the cost of the site, back into the permanent maintenance fund, and register those reports with the state every quarter. And then you never touch the principal. We can only use the interest that collects on that. So that fund just grows and grows and grows over time.
Right. Great.
Yeah. Also, a little detail about Heartland is that we have chosen to not sell plots until the time of need. So if someone is on a hospice program, they can buy a plot, but we didn't want to sell all of these plots to all of these people interested in a green burial years in advance of the death ever happening and have to keep track of all that money and whether we were reserving these places. And so we sell at time of need, and we work closely with families to ensure if a spouse or a child, you know, if they want to be buried near them, that we will just reserve that place as a just as a matter of course.
Okay, we got a question from Craig LeBeau.
I'll add another little thing while he's working that out. We do have available on our website a burial planning form. Because we're not receiving money from people, we do want people to have these conversations with their families. So we make a burial planning form available. It can go with the rest of your end-of-life documents, like your advance directives. But that is to encourage, it's not a legal document, it's just to encourage conversations with your family, like this is the kind of burial that I want. And if you send a copy of that to us, then we are able to keep track of how many people are interested in a burial at Heartland.
Okay, Craig, could you?
Okay, yeah, I got unmuted finally. My question was, when I was looking at that price list and prices on cremation, which was shockingly higher than what I thought it would be, but I'm curious, because the average price to cremate a pet is around $140. Why is it so much higher to cremate a human?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. It's what they charge is all I can say. And there's more liability involved in it. It's a larger body that needs to be cremated.
Is part of it this gouging, or?
You know, I'm hesitant to say that. I mean, if you can, I mean, here people think about funeral homes in terms of almost a sacred place, and they'll use the same one for the family over the years without even bothering to shop anyplace else or have any exposure anyplace else. So that kind of gives funeral homes, those type of funeral homes, a license to raise their prices without worrying about somebody down the street undercutting them. So I wouldn't call it gouging. In some cases, it probably is gouging. But there are definitely low-cost funeral cremation crematories.
We got a question. I'm sorry. We got a question about where can you get, this is from Terry Wiggins. Where can you get an Aquamation? I think you said there wasn't one in Kansas City, but where can you get one?
There's a funeral home. They have 3 locations in Columbia, Missouri, and Sedalia, and Boonville. H.T. May Funeral Home. They have, you can contact them. They have arrangements. They have affiliations with local funeral homes. So the body is taken to H.T. May, say in Columbia, then H.T. May transports it to St. Louis where Aquamation takes place, and then they probably return the remains, the cremains, to the family and from St. Louis, usually in the U.S. mail. So H.T. May Funeral Home. And they charge only about $1,100 for that whole process. I think, you know, and that's what they've been doing it for a couple of years, and that's what the price is the same. They don't have very many people take advantage of it. I talked to Tom May on the phone the other day, and he said they have 7 to 10 of them a year. And so not a lot of people want to, I suppose, go to all of that traveling for the body. But there'll be one here before too much longer, probably. And we'll see. The price is probably an introductory price. Main thing about Aquamation is people just don't know about it yet.